is at risk of collapsing. Likewise, without upholding all of our pillars, all of them, then we are risking our Islam being pretty much collapsible. So think of it this way. A house that only has, a few of the pillars set up, it would be, the least you could say is a shaky house, right? In face of a storm, shaky houses are more prone to collapse, right? Or an earthquake, for example. It might even be a simple earthquake. Like, anybody feel an earthquake here in Ottawa before? Yes? Yes? Usually isn't something that bad. It's usually kind of the after effects of an earthquake that hits somewhere a little far, right? But it could sometimes be a little scary, right? Shaky, and imagine the whole ground shaking under you, and you're like, what's going on, right? But some people sleep through it. Like, I know people that slept through a whole earthquake that happened, and they're like, what? It really? That happened? I'm like, okay, well, it wasn't somebody rocking your bed, right? So, point is, earthquakes can actually cause houses to collapse, especially if their foundations are really small. A few years ago, was it just last year? The tornado when it hit? Was it just last year? 2 years ago? It was last year? Yeah, so when you have kids, time kind of gets muddled up. So anyway, so it was last year where we had a tornado and it hit, and houses, what happened to the houses? Like, a lot of houses lost, some houses lost roofs, some trees got pulled out and slammed into houses, right? And subhanAllah, it was a really scary moment. And typically a house that is strong in its foundation is able to withstand such an ordeal. The analogy is life. Life is not a bed of roses. Life is, as they say, hard, difficult, full of tribulations and tests. Life sucks, right? It's just how it is. It's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not supposed to be easy, right? Because sometimes we kind of feel resentment. Why is my life so difficult? Why is my life so hard? Well, that's by design, brother. That's by design, sister. It's not supposed to be a bed of roses, right? Ease is in Al-Jannah. It's not today, right? A question that Sheikh Muhammad Al-Hassan Al-Baddu Shanqiti, he's asked that question, one of the most knowledgeable shuyukh around. Why is it, or actually the question was, when is it that this constant battle between good and evil will stop, right? When will it end? And his answer was, in Al-Jannah, inshallah, right? It won't end in life. It will be continuously going on, because we have the shaitan, we have people's greed, we have people's transgressions, and tyranny will always be there. And there will always be those that uphold truth and justice, and will always be fighting against injustice, and that will be the case until the end of time, right? Until the end of time. Basically, the Jannah is where there is no hardship. So life is full of hardships, right? So how do we equip ourselves to withstand these hardships, these pains, these struggles, right? By having a solid foundation. The solid foundation here being these pillars, the pillars of Islam, right? The first pillar being the Shahada. The Shahada is not just something that we say lip service, right? It is something that we should feel in our hearts, right? Something that we feel in our hearts and we truly believe in. That there's no God worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So last night, I kind of shared this very interesting comment that was shared by Ustada Yasmin Mujahid. So she says that, just like in our heart, there's this, just like our hearts, every car pretty much has a compartment wherein you can only put gasoline, right? The fuel tank is where you put gasoline and fuel to enable that heart, sorry, not the heart, but the car to move. Likewise, our hearts has a specific part in it that can only be filled with nothing other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you fill the fuel tank with orange juice, right, you might be like, it's just cheaper, right? But what will happen to the car, it won't just not move, it will completely break down. Likewise, if you fill our hearts with other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with money, with a spouse or a relationship, with your career, with your status, your fame, with your what have you, right? Even with yourself. Some people have themselves in their own hearts. They're like, I'm number one after me, the flood, as they say, right? I know in Badi Tufan they say in Arabic, right? So that is sometimes what people do. Whenever you feel anything in your heart other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will happen, you'll suffer. You'll go through hardship. You will suffer pain. And she gave an interesting example of mothers that put their children in their hearts as their number one, right? Their whole lives revolves around their children. And she was saying that that's just wrong. and it will cause a lot of suffering to the mothers. And this is why the moment the child grows older and leaves, what happens to the mom? She feels empty, and she feels despair, and she feels depressed, because her whole life was revolving around her children, and the children are now older and they've moved on, and they had to leave, right, to depend on themselves, to have a life of their own, and so she kind of suffers hardship. And likewise, anything that we put in our hearts other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be a source of misery, subhanAllah. So when Allah is our number one in our hearts, that's what the shahada really means, right? Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And we say the shahada referring to the Prophet as well, and making a testimony that the Prophet is the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recognizing that the only true way to follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to be a true servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is by following the Prophet, right? This is why in the Quran oftentimes, if not always, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned to be obeyed, the Prophet is mentioned as well. وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ. Obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obey the Prophet, right? وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. He does not speak of his own accord, of his own whim. He is a receiver of revelation, alayhi salatu. Alright, so that's the shahada, iqam as-salah, and ita zakah, and fasting. These are acts of worship and rituals of worship. Oftentimes they are put as check marks in our lives. We should not hold them as such, because they do have consequences and results and manifestations in our lives, right? And so when we pray, what's the point of praying when you cheat, lie, and steal? What's the point of fasting when you backbite, slander, and gossip, right? What's the point of paying zakat when you start favoring and holding favors against people, right? And kind of praising yourself and only being charitable when people praise you and thank you and recognize you and have your name on a plaque on the wall, and when that does not happen, you're not charitable, right? So the idea here is that with these acts of worship have ramifications, have consequences in our lives. If these consequences are not met, that means the act itself, the ritual of worship itself, is deficient and hasn't been done right. And this is what we find most people doing, unfortunately, where salah is like this ninja exercise that they do really quick, right? And the ninja salah, right? Really fast, it's done, right? Right? And so we gotta try to maintain our salawat and maintain our fasting and maintain our zakat in such a way that is truly upholding to how it truly is, understanding the essence of it, the fruit of it, right? And you know the verse that says about salah, for example, inna salata tanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkar. That salah prevents mischief and evil and transgression, and as such, when we uphold our salah truly, we become better people, right? The same applies to siyam and zakat as well, and hajj, right? And hajj is not this exercise that we boast of. Oftentimes people boast and they say, you know, I went to hajj 5 times, 6 times, 10 times, right? I'm a hajji now, right? And so that should not be the attitude. Hajj is an act of purification, is where we connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we connect with the community. An interesting note on Hajj, before we kind of move on to the next question about Iman, is how Malcolm X went for Hajj for the first time. Anybody familiar with Malcolm X? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, cool. Anybody see the movie Malcolm X? Denzel Washington? 1 person? 2 people? Awesome movie, by the way. Not a lot of people have seen it. It's very interesting. It's a long movie, but it's a very nice one. And it shows the different, kind of stages of his life and how he went through them all. Anyway, so when he goes to Hajj, he realizes that Islam is the solution to the race problem in America. And he says this, Islam is the solution to the race problem in America. He says, when I went to Hajj, I saw people that have the bluest of blue eyes, the blondest of blonde hair, the whitest of white skin. But they treated me as a brother, right? They didn't treat me with arrogance and pride the way he suffered in the United States. But they treated me with respect and with brotherly love. And he says this is something that Islam brought, this humbleness, this humility, right? This brotherly love is something that Islam brought forth. And he says Islam is the solution to the race problem in America because of what he experienced in Hajj. The next question is, أخبرني عن إيمان. What is, but tell me about faith, right? Tell me about faith. How do you establish faith? And to this, the Prophet responds, ﷺ, with the pillars of faith, right? Which are known as Arkan al-Iman, right? Not the pillars of Islam, but the pillars of faith. The pillars of faith here being that these are, and there are 6. Any one of them? Pillars of Iman? No? Nobody? Yes? Yes, believe in Allah. Jazakallah khair. Tu'minu billahi. Yes? Believe in the prophets. Yes? Believe in the holy books.
Believe in the day of judgment.
In the day of judgment. Very good. Angels. Very good.
Believe in destiny, good and bad.
Belief in destiny, the good therein and the bad thereof. That's right. Very good, mashallah. So his response is just that. He says, and tu'mina billahi, right? وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَكُتُبِهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. And then he adds, وَتُؤْمِنَ بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ. Right? So he lists these things that we need to believe in. Right? We believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means we believe in the Creator. We believe we're not alone, no matter how alone we may seem. Right? We're not alone. We have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is as-Sami' al-Basir, that is seeing, all hearing, knows us inside out, knows our inner thoughts, right? Knows our dreams, our aspirations. We're not alone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. He's the provider. He's the one that provides for us. He's the one that takes care of us, right? And then we also know and believe in the angels. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created angels. And these angels were created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a reason. And they are also, for us, an interesting example. And it's an interesting story because at one point in time, a Sahabi named Hanzala, he was sad and upset. And Abu Bakr Siddiq comes to him and says, Hanzala, how are you doing today? What's up? And then Hanzala says, I feel I'm a hypocrite. Abu Bakr says, why? What happened? He says, when I'm alone, I am not as righteous as I am when I'm with the Prophet. When I'm with the Prophet, I feel so connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I feel I can see hellfire and paradise right in front of me. I feel that I am, I'm there, I'm in the zone, right? But when I'm away from the Prophet, I feel that I'm not like that. So I'm a hypocrite. Abu Bakr says, إِذَا نَافَقَ Abu Bakr. If that's the case, then Abu Bakr is also a hypocrite, right? So let's go together and ask the Prophet about this. So they go and they complain and they ask about this to the Prophet, and then the Prophet says something profound. He says, if you're always going to be like that, the way you are with me at all times, لَصَافَحَتْكُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ فِي الطُّرُقَاتِ. Angels would have shaken your hands, right? Angels in the streets, they would have come to you and shaken your hands. You would be like angels, in other words, right? And so, in other words, to be righteous, we could look up to the angels. And the angels asked the question to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He told them that He was going to create a human being. What was the question that they asked, or the bafflement that they had, right? أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَا يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. Are you going to put on this earth somebody that will cause bloodshed and harm and corruption while we نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ, we praise you constantly, we are in gratitude of you constantly, right? وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ, and we consider you sacred and above all else, right? Why did the angels say this, and why did Allah report this question of the angels, or this comment of the angels, this act of the angels? So that we know this is what angels do, and as such aspire to it, right? To work hard to be like the angels. Angels don't have free will, we have it. We can choose to be worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at a deeper level. And then the next item that we need to believe in is the prophets. All prophets come and were chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to deliver a message to humanity. Allah did not leave human beings on their own. The difference with Islam compared to other religions or other messages that were sent to previous prophets is that Allah promises that this religion, this Islam, that's not called a religion, this deen, right? Some of you know that I have issues with the word religion as a translation for deen. But the point is that this deen, Islam, is unique and different. Why? Because Allah promises that it will be preserved. إِنَّ نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّ لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises that we have revealed this revelation, this dhikr, this remembrance, and we will protect it. We will preserve it. And as such, compared to previous messages that were sent to previous prophets, there is no corruption in Islam. It will not be corrupted. There will be people that will attempt to corrupt it, but they won't be successful. Right? وَرُسُلِهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, the day of judgment. We're all going to be held to account. We might, be upset that we didn't get justice. We didn't attain justice, or we didn't get rewarded for a good deed that we've done. Nobody thanked us, nobody praised us, or somebody did a horrible thing and they didn't get punished, right? They didn't get their judgment in life. Well, in the hereafter, that all will happen. People that did good deeds will be rewarded, people that did bad deeds will be punished. Nothing will go unaccounted for. Everything will be held to account. That is the day of account. And so, the very famous saying, حاسبوا أنفسكم قبل أن تحاسبوا, of Umar ibn Khattab, hold yourself to account before you are held to account on the Day of Judgment. We have that opportunity to hold ourselves to account in life. Belief in the Day of Judgment pushes that in our minds and in our hearts, that we need to hold ourselves to account, right? We make sure that what we do in our days is righteous and good, and before we do something, we ask ourselves, is this something pleasing to Allah or displeasing to Allah? And inshallah then we improve as we go on, right? And if we've done something wrong, we repent, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for it, and the next day we do better. And the last thing is, وَالْقَدَرِ وَتُؤْمِنَ بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِهِ. Believe in destiny, the good thereof and the bad thereof. What does that mean? It means a lot of things, right? Qadar is kind of its own topic, it's a deep one. But point is that things are ordained for us. That if the whole world were to gather to try to harm us, they would not be able to do so unless Allah has already written it, that it will happen. And if the whole world wants to come and benefit us, that benefit will not come to play unless it has been written for us, right? And so in that way, we don't feel resentment, right? We don't allow discontent. We allow contentment to be the dominant feeling that we have, right? If we were in a relationship that did not work, or we were at a job that we got laid off from, or we didn't get the promotion, or we were in a career that we had to change because it didn't work out, or we're in a university school or taking a course that we didn't get the good grade for, right? What have you? Anything that you were aspiring for and dreaming of, but it didn't happen, typically people feel resentful, upset, angry. And that's human nature, that's okay, right? But don't allow these feelings to fester and to grow, because in the end, we should not feel discontent with what Allah has made for us. We should move on, work on what's best, do our best, leave the rest in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and move on inshallah, and realize that things that may be hard that we may be going through is not punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because there is that thought among some people that hardships that we go through is punishment. No, it's not. Punishment is in the hereafter, inshallah, after we're held to account, after our good deeds are compared to our bad deeds, after things are put on the scale, right? That's when punishment is laid out. In life, there's no punishment. There's hardships, tribulations and tests. Everything is a test, right? Whether it's ease and comfort, that is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How will you use that ease and comfort? Will you use it to please Allah? Well, or if it's hardship, how will you pass that test? Will you be patient? Will you be strong? Or will you be resentful and discontent, right? You'll allow discontent. Will you spiral into despair, or will you always have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? All right, moving on. The next question is ihsan. And this is a very interesting question. And scholars say that these are actually three different levels. So if you first start with Islam, right, the foundations, then you build the next level of that building that you're trying to build, right? The higher the building, the better it is, inshallah, right? And so you have this building that you're building, that is Iman. And the Prophet said about Iman, an interesting hadith, another hadith where it says, لَيْسَ الْإِيمَانُ بِالتَّمَنِّي وَلَكِنَّ الْإِيمَانَ مَا وَقَرَ فِي الْقَلْبِ وَصَدَّقَهُ الْعَمَلِ. Iman is not by wishful thinking, it's what is affirmed in the heart and translated, manifested into action, into behavior, right? So it's not enough to say you're a believer while your actions say otherwise, right? Then, that is hypocrisy. Ihsan is the next level, where you are now trying to perfect your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that perfection, or that striving to perfection, kind of reflects on everything that you do, right? Everything that you do is close to perfect, not because you want better reward in dunya, but because you want better reward in al-akhirah, right? So the Prophet responds to the question, أخبرني عن الإحسان. He says, عليه الصلاة والسلام, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. To worship and serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see Him. For if you do not see Him, He subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. And you know that. You know that you're always watched, right? This is what is called the muraqabah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're always aware that Allah is always watching you, right? You might be on a highway, you look around, no cops, right? And so you speed, right? But you know Allah is watching you, right? But sometimes we forget that. Sometimes when we're alone, nobody's around, nobody's here to judge me, right? So I can do whatever. And the shaitan comes to us and really does that, right? Makes us forget that Allah is always watching over us. Allah is always there, seeing us. That everything we do is held to and recorded, and will be held to account for it. We forget that often, right? So ihsan is that level where they don't forget that, right? They're aware that Allah is always watching, always there. And as such, they strive to do their best at all times. They don't need to have a parent parent in the room. They don't need to have an uncle in the room. They don't need to have a professor in the room or a boss in the room to be correct and decent. They're correct and decent at all times because Allah is always watching and always there, right? This is ihsan, and like I said, each one of these can be a lecture on its own, but we're just kind of skimming the surface and going through it, just like you go into a garden and enjoy some of the flowers and some of, you don't kind of spend too much time on the jasmines or on the, daffodils or what have you. You kind of just move quick, just taking a sniff here and a sniff there. This is what we're doing. All right, the next question is an interesting one, right? So he says, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ السَّاعَةِ. Tell me about the hour, the last hour. And some scholars say that the last hour here is different than the last day, right? The last hour is actually the last hour of existence, right? And the last day is typically referred to the Day of Judgment, right? So it's kind of like after the last hour, right? So the last hour really is in our lives still, but kind of really close. Hour, don't take it literally, figuratively speaking. The hour is the last few, moments before the Day of Judgment actually happens, right? So anyway, he says, the person being asked does not know more than the person asking, right? So he says, okay, sure, fine. Tell me about its signs. To this, the Prophet responds, a very interesting response. And you know how, maybe when we were younger, there was these, fantastical, legendary stories about, the signs of the Day of Judgment. And typically what comes to mind is? What? What? Buildings? Okay, cool, that's the response of the Prophet. But what comes to mind typically when you talk about the last day to kids? What? Yes?
The sun will set in the west.
The sun will set in the west. Okay, cool, that's good. Doesn't come to mind often to the kids, but yeah, yes? Masih ad-Dajjal and Ya'juj and Ma'juj, right? Who are Ya'juj and Ma'juj? What's that all about? And, fairy tales and stories come up, right? And imagination runs wild, right? So anyway, the Prophet does not respond about any of that, right? He simply says two very interesting signs. He highlights them. And if you kind of think about it, they exist today. He says, alayhi salatu wasalam, أَن تَلِدُ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا. Right, so that's number one. That you will find a person will pretty much be giving birth to their master. Right, what does that mean? It means the children will be the masters of the parents. Right, so don't take it literally, take it figuratively. It means that kids will own you, right? So, subhanAllah, and this is so true, as a parent, I now understand the saying that says, al-ayalu majbanatun mabkhala, right? So it's just the saying, but it means that when you have kids, you become a coward and you become stingy. Why do you become a coward? Because now you're much more risk averse than you used to be in your youth. You'll be risk taking, you can, jump off cliffs, go skiing, bungee jumping, whatever, right? The moment you have kids, you're like, no, maybe that doesn't work anymore, right? And then, people make fun of you. They're like, you can't go. And then you're like, what? Fine, I'm not going anyway, right? That, what are we, 10, right? And maybe that would push me then, but, now, no, I'm not doing it, right? So, yes, you become afraid because you have a responsibility on your shoulders, right? And so, yeah. Anyway, moving on. So, the next one is stingy. You actually become stingy in the sense that you don't want to spend on yourself as much as you used to. You want to really kind of hold on to everything for your kids, right? So these things happen because you love your children, right? But then sometimes the children are not really that grateful, right? So they yell back, talk back, think that they own you, think that they deserve or they're entitled to whatever it is that they're getting from their parents, right? And subhanAllah, you find that today where, that's pretty much the example the Prophet is laying out, where children no longer have birr al-walidain, no longer have politeness and kindness and decency with their parents, right? They actually become or think of themselves as masters of their parents. And the last one is interesting, right? He says, وَأَنْ تَرَى الْحُفَاةَ الْعُرَاةَ الْعَالَةَ رِعَاءَ الشَّاءِ يَتَطَاوَلُونَ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ, which translates to, you'll find those that were typically barefooted, very barely able to cover themselves, poor. They used to rely on a lot of other people, right? you will all of a sudden find them competing to build lofty buildings, right? So the interesting thing here is that competition becomes about building stronger or larger or higher or taller buildings, right? And the competition, if you take it figuratively, becomes about worldly gains. I have this title, you have that title. What, you only have only 2 acronyms after your name? I have like 3, right? What, you only drive, you know, what, a Fiat? What, that's horrible, right? Even though the new Fiats are pretty nice. But, you know, you drive, you know what, that car? No, man, come on. Like, you know, like the brother here drives a really old car. No, I'm just kidding. So, you know, like that, right? Like, what? Drives an old car, like, you know, come on, get the latest model, like, it's 2020, man, right? So, this is the attitude sometimes we have. And sometimes it's on silly stuff, right? You know, you look in the mirror and you're like, you know, wow, I'm just awesome, so handsome, you know, inshallah, inshallah. Right? But you know, these other guys, like, you know, they don't even come close to, you know, my handsomeness, right? Sometimes it's like that. It's silly stuff like that, right? And subhanAllah, the idea is we should not be competing on these worldly things. Worldly things serve a purpose. All gains in life, whether it be your career, whether it be your status, whether it be your fame, whether it be how many likes you have on a post, whether it be how many followers you have on Insta, right? Any of those stuff, they're worldly gains, but they should serve a purpose, a better purpose. The true competition is what is mentioned in the Quran, وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ, in serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? In being righteous, in being noble, in being truthful, in truly upholding your faith, and being true people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of your belief. You claim you're Muslim, you claim you're a follower of the Prophet ﷺ. How true is that, right? That is what we should be competing in. How much do we serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That is what we truly should be competing about. And that competition will not be settled in the dunya. In the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the judge, right? And so, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, the most noble amongst you are not those that are better built and have better biceps, right? Or are taller, or have the fairer skin, or have better bank accounts, or have the better car, or the larger house, right? It's not that. The noblest amongst you are those that are best in their taqwa, in their connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in their piety. And so, our competitions, one of the signs of the Day of Judgment, or the signs of the last hour, will be unfortunately about building loftier buildings and loftier worldly presences. And so, as such, it is worldly competitions. And this is one of the signs that you see around us. People competing in the dunya, forgetting about the hereafter. And at that point, the man leaves, right? 2 words, ثُمَّ انطَلَقَ. The man left. That was it. And Umar says, فَلَبِثْتُ مَلِيًّا. I just stuck around for a little bit, quiet, trying to kind of process what just happened, right? And then the Prophet turns to me and says, Ya Umar, أَتَدْرِي مَنِ السَّائِلِ. Umar, do you know who this dude was, right? And Umar responds, Allahu wa Rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Messenger knows best. To this, the Prophet responds, فَإِنَّهُ جِبْرِيلٌ أَتَاكُمْ يُعَلِّمُكُمْ دِينُكُم. This is Jibreel who has come to teach you your deen. To come to teach you your deen. Now, we'll end on the deen part. Why is it that I hate to translate the word deen to religion? Because religion has negative connotations in the Western world, A. B, it also conjures up the image that it is a set of rituals, right? A set of rituals. And Islam is not a set of rituals. Islam is a set of rituals plus much more, right? So those that kind of try to reduce Islam to a set of rituals and say it is about your salah, it is about your siyam, it is about your qiyamul layl, it's about you reading the Quran at home or in the masjid. That is what Islam is. They have a narrow understanding of Islam and they're not giving it justice. Islam is that, yes, but much more as well. And that is the effects of that on our lives, right? What's the point of saying that you fast while you do all the other bad stuff, right? What's the point of saying that you pray and you're doing all the other bad stuff, right? So the point is, our salah, our siyam, our zakat is really to instill in our hearts, right, an attitude and a behavior that will be reflected in how we interact with each other, right? This is why the Prophet ﷺ has used very interesting hadith where he elaborates on the word deen, right? So inna dina, right, something, right? Like what? Inna deen al-mu'amala. Deen is how you treat others, how you interact with others. Or in another hadith, inna deen al-nasiha. Deen is how you advise others, right? Never will you find a hadith where the Prophet says, inna deen al-salat, right? Or inna deen qira'at al-Qur'an, right? Or inna deen al-siyam, right? Even though these are all very important parts of deen, you cannot neglect them and say, you know what, I'm not going to do them anymore, I'm above that, right? You can't say that, can't do that. But they are part of the deen, and they have ramifications and consequences that should be manifested in how we behave and how we interact with each other. A sad story that happened here, Carlton, actually long time ago, right? And I was at Carlton at the time, and so what happened was that, breaking news, a bunch of students taking an ethics course in the engineering department at Carleton University were caught cheating on the exam. So you can see the irony, right? Ethics course, cheating, right? Very ironical, right? And the sad thing was many of them were Muslim, right? And I actually knew a lot of them. And you know what? I can understand, the pressures they were under to kind of fall into that trap and cheat, because it was a tough course, and it had a very high kind of English requirement, and a lot of these students were either immigrants or international students or people that may be struggling with the English language, right? And so there was a lot of pressure, not just in the course material, but also in understanding it due to, the English requirements, and as such, a lot of pressure. And unfortunately, they failed the test and they cheated. And I'm not talking about the exam here or the test that they took. I'm talking about the test of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where people go through hardship and go through tribulations and go through pressures and give in to it or fail the bigger test here, right? And so point here is that what's the point of being somebody that is righteous, that's connected to the MSA, that is praying, that is volunteering, while that does not reflect on your life, on your personality, on who you are, right? You got to do all the above, right? So deen is a good word to use, and it means path, right? Path. And so our path is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a journey that we take in our lives, how we improve our hearts inwardly, and that should reflect outwardly in how we behave, inshallah. Anything good I said is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Any mistakes on my own, I ask to forgive me for it, inshallah. I'll open the floor for a few questions and comments, so don't just limit them to questions. If you have a comment, please feel free to share, inshallah. And then I'll pass the mic back to the sisters. Questions? You had a question, brother? Not anymore? All right. Any other questions or comments? No? Yes? No? Good? Yes?
I was having a conversation with one of my coworkers in Best Buy, and he's a practicing Christian, like he's from Syria or whatever. So we were talking about religion in its essence, and the reason I'm asking this question is because perhaps when you're talking with people, when you're trying to give dawah, it requires a different answer to the question, because he asked me how religious are you, how pious are you, and I didn't really give a straight answer, but obviously when you're talking to or perhaps I'm mistaken, I guess the way I see it is when you're talking to a Muslim, you shouldn't really praise yourself and be like, oh, I pray every day, I do all this. You should just try to keep humble and say alhamdulillah, whatever, but should you answer differently when you're posed with a question from a non-Muslim? Because suppose he's a practicing Christian or Jew, and then or any other religion, and you tell them no, I don't practice that much, then they could think, okay, then what's the point? Why are you being Muslim? Rather, if you say yeah, I'm very I practice it on a very deep level, then they could be interested. So does that require a different answer, or because in this context we're going to be talking to Allah and Muslims?
Yes, so that's a good question. So typically the good answer is that you can identify as a practicing Muslim. So you say, I don't know how pious I am. That is something that God will judge, but I'd like to think of myself as a practicing Muslim. I try to practice my deeds, right? And you can even mention it's a constant struggle, because let's face it, who amongst us did not have they call it bad hair day, but a bad morning day where you wake up as a zombie and you barely could make Fajr, if ever, right? And so we all suffered through such days where it's hard, it's not easy, right? It's difficult, and we recognize that, and there's no problem in sharing that as well, that we try our best and we strive, and it's a constant struggle and it's not an easy thing. But I like to think of myself as, generally speaking, I try to be a practicing person, right? So there's no problem in being honest about that and talking about it in that way, but also make sure that you do have humbleness and you're not boasting of things, because boastfulness is perhaps the first step towards arrogance. And one thing I didn't mention actually was the phrase يَتَطَوَّلُونَ فِي بُنْيَانٍ, mentioned in the hadith, that is actually about boastfulness. They're boasting of the lofty buildings that they built. They didn't just build them, and they're not just competing about it, but they're boasting of it, right? I have the taller building. I have the better house. I have the better car. I have the better career. I have the better acronyms after my name, right? And so as such, that is what people sometimes boast about. They're happy. They feel it's an achievement. They forget that the provider of these skills that enable the person to reach such a status is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The blessings that we have is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And it's not just because of your own effort. What you did was use the skills Allah gave you, right, to the best of your abilities, whether it be eyesight, intellect, ability to think, ability to memorize, ability to study. All of that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you used these blessings, and hopefully you didn't use it just to gain worldly reputations and worldly gains, but to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything we do should be with that ultimate goal in mind. That is, remember, the number one in our hearts. So boasting is the first step towards being arrogant and thinking of yourself as better than other people. And the Prophet has reported this about arrogance, an interesting hadith, where he says, لا يدخل الجنة من كان في قلبه مثقال ذرة من كبر. No one will enter Jannah in whose heart there is an atom's weight of arrogance. Just a little arrogance in our hearts could lead us to be prevented from entering paradise. Imagine that. Then a man came to the Prophet. He was a bit worried. He says, إن الرجل يحب أن تكون ثيابه حسنة ونعله حسن. Like sometimes a man likes to have nice shoes and nice clothes. Is that arrogance, Ya Rasulullah? Basically is what he's asking. And the Prophet says, إن الله جميل يحب الجمال ولكن الكبر بطر الحق وغمط الناس. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beautiful and loves beauty, but arrogance is to put aside the truth, right? Forsake the truth and consider yourself better than other people, or consider other people inferior to you, right? That is arrogance that we must avoid at all costs, and boastfulness is steps towards that. Yes?
Is there another word that you use to translate deen, especially when talking to people who aren't English?
Yes, so it's a good question. How do you translate deen into English if you're talking to people that may not necessarily be, or may not be Muslim, not know the word deen? So I prefer the word path, right? It is a complete path that is laid out for us on how to live our lives, right? And our deen tells us how to be good politicians, how to be good leaders, how to be good generals, how to be good fathers and mothers, how to be good children, right? How to be good cousins, how to be good husbands and wives, right? Our deen has something to say about all aspects of our lives. Right? It is not just about spirituality. That is the core of it. But built upon the spirituality is daily dealings. And that's why Islam is a very practical path, right? It is not simply spirituality, and never will we be asked to forsake dunya completely, like shun marriage, don't get married, live, a life of celibacy. No, there's nothing like that in Islam, right? Or, don't get children, right? They're going to distract you. Or, don't work. Just focus on going to the masjid and, you live in the masjid and, be a abid, be a worshipper. Don't do anything else. That should be your full-time job. No, that is not in Islam. That's not part of Islam. Although you will find people in history that say just that are Muslim. They will say, don't get married. Marriage distracts you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Or don't get children. That distracts you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or don't work and life and dealing in the market and being a person of the market. That's dunya, right? Shun that. Some people do say that, but that's not what Islam is about. That's a narrow understanding. And so as such, the word I would use is path, a complete way of life. Islam is a path for our lives that has been laid out by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not just a religion. And this concept is strange for people because people think of Islam as a religion, one of many, and many Muslims think that way too, right? Islam is like Christianity, like Judaism, like this, like that, one in many religions that are out there, right? But that should not be our attitude as Muslims. Islam is not just a religion like the religions out there. Islam has many unique things about it, one of which is that it is a complete way of life, a path that we are governing our lives in accordance to, inshallah. Don't know if that answers your question. Yes? Comment? Comment? Sure.
Yeah, and that's also like it's supported like in like in Surah Al-Fatiha, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم.
Yes, exactly.
It's along that path or that way.
That's right. The verse that we recite at least 17 times a day, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, guide us to the straight path, right? Is in Surah Al-Fatiha. In our salawat, if we are upholding just the obligatory salawat, then we have been reciting Surah Al-Fatiha at least 17 times a day. That is how many times a year? Around 6,200 or so times. Imagine, John Doe comes to you and says, I read a paragraph 6,200 times a year, right? And then you're like, wow, that's commitment, man. Like, why do you read it? And he's like, everybody else does. It's like, really? Okay, well, what does it mean? Like, I honestly don't know, right? That would be weird, right? So we need to, inshallah, understand the Quran, right? Understand Surah Al-Fatiha, understand what we do in our salah. We can't just be people that simply read it out without really knowing what it means, and you're like, I don't know, right? Just do it, right? That should not be our attitude towards Islam. It should be of understanding so that it has ramifications and effect on our hearts. Because sometimes people pray and they're like, you know what, I've been praying for 5 years and nothing, I don't feel anything. Really? Were you praying or were you doing a ninja exercise? Yes?
I don't know how much time we have, but do you mind elaborating a little bit on the characteristics somebody who's giving dawah should have when doing that act, specifically even in cases where you're confronted with somebody who's being perhaps a little bit aggressive in the way they ask their questions?
So, good point. Do we have time, Ashad? Okay, all right. So the question is, what are the qualities of a caller to Islam or an inviter to Islam or somebody that is informing others about Islam, right? A da'i, if you like, or a da'i. And so, what do you think is the first characteristic?
To practice what the person is preaching.
To practice what you preach. Awesome. Good. However, I would disagree just a little bit, right? When it comes to Islam, you don't have to be, a sheikh to be able to share a few things, right? You can share even if you're not even if you're struggling to practice it, right? So not 100% practicing what you preach. In other words, you could be calling to truthfulness, but you yourself struggle with being truthful. Or you're calling for people to control their temper, but you yourself have a little bit of a struggle with temper, right? So that's fine, because we're all human beings, we have shortcomings. That should not prevent us from being people that invite people to what is good, inshallah. Yes? No.
Intention?
Have a good intention. Very good, mashallah. Yes?
The knowledge of what you're talking about and gentleness.
That's right. Knowledge and gentleness. Very good. The Prophet ﷺ has a very beautiful hadith that says, مَا وُضِعَ الرِّفْقُ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا زَانَهُ وَمَا نُزِعَ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا شَانَهُ. Shared that last night as well. Gentleness. Whenever placed in anything becomes beautiful. Whenever removed from something becomes ugly. So we've got to be really gentle, really polite, really kind, really nice, really welcoming, and accommodating, and understanding, and tolerant. And even if people disagree with you, you don't have to kind of, force people or expect people to agree with you. It's fine that people disagree. So you've got to be really patient, really strong on that front. And of course have some knowledge of what is it that you're sharing, so you're able to answer the questions. If you don't know, you can simply say, I don't know. And قَالَ لَا أَعْلَمُ فَقَدْ أَفْتَى, as they say, right? People that say, I don't know, they've actually given a good fatwa, as opposed to having, a mufti in every 3 people, right? So the idea is that you can say, I don't know, you know what? Sister so-and-so has more information about that. That table over there is specifically about this topic, and I'm sure they have somebody that can answer that question, right? So it's fine to say I don't know about something, right? And even if you do know it, but you're unable to form it into words, or you're worried, or you're not 100% confident in your answer, you can refer people to other people, inshallah. Hopefully you have resources around that can help with that. So that's a good point. Other comments? Yes?
I think you already mentioned it while you were talking, but I think patience is very important because no one's going to change their opinion in like a split second. So it's a very long process and you need to have patience for that.
Jazakallahu khairan. No one is going to change their opinion right then and there. And really what you're doing is you're planting seeds, right? And so It's like, you're a farmer. Anybody ever farm, by the way, or have a garden where they plant a seed in? Anybody ever? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, cool. So, you don't expect the carrot to come up right then and there, or the potato, or whatever it is that you planted, or the tomato, right? Tomato. You don't expect it to come up right away. You expect it to take some time, right? And so you put the seeds, you wait a little while, you put some water. You don't flood it with water, right? You got to make sure that the water is enough, but not too much so it doesn't flood. You also make sure that there's enough sunlight. You tend to it, you take care of it, and then eventually, inshallah, fruit comes forth. And sometimes the potato doesn't look as good as you hoped it would look, or the carrot doesn't look as, they say, actually, this is an interesting side comment, nothing to do with anything, but they say that how, the vegetables in the vegetable market looks awesome. It's because what they're doing is they're actually throwing all the vegetables that does not look awesome, right? Carrots and potatoes come up in so many different forms that looks ugly, tastes the same, is exactly the same if you chop it, right? But just doesn't look as nice. And so what do? SubhanAllah, they throw it. Imagine that. Such a waste. Anyway, side comment, nothing to do with anything. All right, any other comments? Yes?
So let's say like you're trying to call to a particular trait that you're struggling with yourself. Does it help, or are you allowed to tell the person or admit to the person you're trying to call to that you're struggling with that trait?
It depends. So sometimes if you're able to connect with a person and the person you're able to be close to them, because you are admitting a vulnerability there, right? You're being vulnerable, right? And you don't want to be vulnerable with somebody that's aggressive and attacking you, right? But you could be vulnerable with somebody that is kind and maybe has expressed some vulnerability themselves, right? So if somebody comes and says, I'm struggling with finding, a purpose in life, you could say, I'm struggling too. It's been laid out for me in Islam, but trying to adhere to that purpose in life and trying to find it and trying to accommodate it and trying to find a way that it would be mine as well. I'm struggling with that as well, right? So but with somebody that is attacking, and you might face, by the way, people that come and attack and question not for any other reason other than planting doubt, right, in your minds and in your hearts. Some people do that, unfortunately, right? And so when you face that, you gotta kind of be a little careful and build some walls and listen to them, be respectful, be kind, be gentle, be patient, but at the same time, don't get angry, don't get frustrated. If you find yourself kind of going there, point them in a different direction, tell them, that person can answer your question better, I don't know, right? So, yeah, you're doing a great job, by the way. I know it's really hard sometimes, especially if you have somebody that is attacking you. Back in the day, we had a person that was coming to our IAWs purposely for no other reason than to start a fight, right? And they were from a particular non-Muslim religion, and they were coming just to fight, really. Like, they weren't there to listen, they were there to argue and fight and really start a fight. And so sometimes some of our hot-headed brothers would get angry and feel justified in fighting back, yelling back. And so in the middle of IAW, you have this yelling match, right, going on. And what that does is it paints a very horrible picture of the whole event and pushes other people that may have been interested in coming and asking questions to not come to that place. And, they want to avoid the place where fight is happening, right? So you got to be careful not to fall into such traps, inshallah. All right. Do we have time for one more comment? One more comment? Then should we go away? Or a question? One more question or comment? If none, then that's great. Yes?
I was going to say wisdom.
Wisdom is an awesome trait as well. Yes, Jazakallah khair. When to speak and when to be quiet. And what battles to choose. Because sometimes somebody might come to you and they have a lot of questions, and you have to choose which questions to answer, or which are more important, and give priority. That takes a lot of wisdom, right? Because not everything needs to be answered at the same time. And interesting enough, like people that have been experienced in dealing with like new converts and have actually, they claim or they have, and they, about them that they're the ones that were able to bring to Islam so many people, right? How do they do this? Because they're very wise in what they address, right? They don't address all things at once. They take things gradually, right? They address things gradually and slowly, and they focus on the more important before the less important. Let's not say trivial, but the less important, right? Right. So sometimes people have an issue with the less important, but what about the more important? Are you okay with the more important? Let's agree about that, right? Before we go into the less important stuff, right? But yeah, very good point. Jazakallah. All right, that concludes my session with you guys. Jazakallah khair for your time and for your presence and for your efforts. May Allah reward you and bless you, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. and hopefully we see each other again, inshallah. Maybe on Thursday at the 40 Nawawi Hadith Halaqa. I'm there every Thursday, inshallah. So hopefully you see some of you there, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We just have one announcement. If everyone could just bring it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So if you haven't already signed it, just say
So, if you haven't signed in on the attendance sheet that's going around, just please make sure you do that before going. If you guys don't know, I don't know if it has been mentioned in the chats yet, but 3 out of the 5 training sessions are going to be mandatory. So you are allowed to miss 2, but if you can make it to all of them, then please do come, inshallah. But if you can't, then 3 out of them, 3 out of the 5 training sessions are mandatory. So, like I said last, I think it was during the general meeting, our trainings this year are not going to be just workshops or just lectures. So today, inshallah, we've had 2 lectures, but the next one is a workshop. So it's about the virtues of patience, and so Tegan's going to be leading that one. So inshallah, we'll start with that.
Are we? Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So we're gonna break up into your booths for this next part. So basically, what we're gonna do is in our booths, we're gonna talk about 6 stories that have been selected from the Quran and other sources, and we're gonna talk about the virtues of patience that you can derive from each story, and then we're gonna come back as a big group and we're gonna discuss it as a big group. So if Aya, Saad, and Ilham could get their booths, I think Destiny can be up here, and then you guys can figure out where you want to be in the back. Because I'm in Destiny, so I only care about Destiny. And yeah, so then we'll come back. You guys have about like 15-20 minutes, inshallah. Are we live streaming this?
No, to talk, not to get into your groups. Get into your groups now.